In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the greatest outside-the-box thinking moments in sports. Many times, those that become winners are the biggest, the fastest, or even the smartest. But today, we're going to be looking at some of the most creative. And first on our list, we have Adam Horowitz. Adam Horowitz was a Division III baseball pitcher for the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth Corsairs. In his first game pitching in college back in 2020, Adam pulled off a move where he shows the batter his empty hand and went into his windup anyway, but somehow the ball appears coming out of his hand in the follow-through, which caused a surprise strike to the batter. The way Adam pulled off this illusion was by placing the ball on the backside of his glove when he put it behind his back. With the ball hidden on the backside of his glove, he is then free to reveal his empty hand before re-gripping the ball and setting the pitch. Adam's creative pitch proves that you don't need to be a professional athlete to introduce outside-the-box thinking in sports. Next on our list, we have Chad Morton. Chad Morton was a running back in the NFL who made his mark in the league by being a kick return specialist. Chad took his job as a return specialist very seriously. He not only trained and practiced on the different scenarios he would face, he also studied the rule book regarding the situations he may face. And on October 10th of 2004, Chad got to put his playbook studies to use. As the Baltimore Ravens kicked off the ball towards the sideline, Chad intentionally stepped out of bounds and fielded the ball while his foot was out of bounds. While most people were confused as to why he would do this, Chad knew that by doing this, by rule, the kickoff would be ruled out of bounds and be placed at the 40-yard line after the penalty was assessed. Washington ended up losing this game and finished 6-10 that season, so most people don't remember this play happening. However, nearly 8 years later, Green Bay Packers returner Randall Cobb made headlines for making a very similar play. And the very next year, Jeremy Ross also made a similar play. Where did they learn about this? Well, they could have watched the footage from the obscure game from almost a decade earlier, but it just so happens that the Packers' assistant special teams coach for both of these years was none other than Chad Morton. Coincidence? I think not. Next up, we have camouflage kick returns. Catching the ball out of bounds isn't the only way to take advantage on special teams. One kick return strategy has been to have one kick returner lay down and camouflage themselves into the end zone. The first time this trick was used was in 2012, when the Philadelphia Eagles had Riley Cooper lie down in the S lettering of the Saints end zone. It was fielded by Brandon Boykins, who threw it over to Cooper, who stood up with no one around him for an easy score. Unfortunately for the Eagles, the pass was a forward pass, and in American football, you can only throw the ball backwards or laterally on a kick return. Because of the forward pass, the play did not count. The next time this type of play was run was in 2014 when TCU had BJ Catalan wearing black and purple lie down in their purple end zone. This time the pass was not a forward pass and was thrown perfectly laterally, which is allowed. Unfortunately for TCU, one of the blockers got caught holding a defender, which again meant that the play did not count. Finally, in 2016, Kansas tried the play with their all-blue uniforms against the blue end zone. The play finally worked when Steve Sims Jr. passed the ball laterally to Laquiviante Gonzalez. The play got Kansas to the 36-yard line, and there were no penalties on the play. Next up, we have Stephen Bradberry. Stephen Bradberry was a speed skater from Australia. While Australia might not be known for its winter sports, Bradberry was a veteran of the sport with many years under his belt by the time of the 2002 Olympics. Bradberry knew that speed skating can be a tough sport and a dangerous sport, as he himself had sustained major injuries throughout his career. By the 2002 Olympics, speed skating had grown into a sport with more and more contact. While you're not allowed to purposely impede your competitors or intentionally take them out, the skaters that were winning championships were the ones that were holding their opponents back and making contact with the other skaters, while trying to look like they were just skating their race and made incidental contact. At this point, Bradberry was amongst the oldest competitors, and knew that he was not going to win against the medal favorites on speed alone. But he was also not the type to try to take out his opponents. When Bradberry was set to race in the quarterfinals, he was pitted up against the favorite to win the gold medal, Apollo Ono, and Marc Gagnon of Canada, the defending world champion. and because only the top 2 finishers from each race would proceed to the semifinals, the odds were stacked against Bradberry. However, during the race there was a collision that knocked one of the skaters out of the race, and Bradberry finished 3rd in his race, which would not be good enough for him to advance, and thought that he had been eliminated. However, Canada's Gagnon was disqualified for the collision, which allowed Bradberry to advance to the semifinals. In the semifinal race, Bradberry was in the rear, well off the pace of the leaders. However, defending champion Kim Dong-sung of South Korea, Lee Jia-jun of China, and Mathieu Turcotte of Canada all crashed, paving the way for Bradberry to take 1st place after Korea's Terao was disqualified for causing the collision, and advancing him through to the finals. This put Bradberry in an unlikely situation, in the finals, competing for an individual medal in his 30s, but Bradberry would be going up against 4 of the fastest skaters in the world, all in their primes. But if Bradberry could somehow finish ahead of 2 of his competitors, he could claim an Olympic medal. In the final, Bradberry was again well off the pace. Bradberry again strategically held back, allowing his competitors to take all the risks. It was along the last turn when all 4 of his competitors, Ono, An Hyun-soon, Lee, and Turcotte, crashed at the final corner while jostling for the gold medal. This allowed Bradberry, who was around 15 meters behind with only 50 meters to go, to avoid the pileup and take the victory. In an interview after the race, Bradberry is quoted as saying, "I was the oldest bloke in the field, and I knew that skating 4 races back to back, I wasn't going to have any petrol left in the tank. So there was no point in getting there and mixing it up because I was going to be in last place anyway. So I figured I might as well stay out of the way, be in last place, and hope for some people to get tangled up." And that outside-the-box thinking is how Stephen Bradberry won a gold medal in the 2002 Olympic Games. Next up, we have Dave Wottle. Dave Wottle was an American Olympic runner that competed in the 800-meter race. Wottle was known for wearing a white baseball cap during his races, which kept the hair out of his eyes and acted as a sweatband and sun visor. Wattle's favorite distance to run was actually 1 mile, and was his specialty in college prior to the Olympic Games in 1972. Wottle only decided to run the 800 meter, which is roughly half a mile, because his track coach at Bowling Green, Mel Brote, persuaded him to race the 800 meter as a speed workout to help as training for the mile. In 1971, Dave missed the entire NCAA track season with an injury to his knee, but came back for the 1972 NCAA season. It was there that he won the 800 meter event, which Dave only started participating in to help him train for the mile. He also ended up winning the NCAA 1500 race that year. Wottle ended up qualifying for the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich, Germany, after winning the 800 meter in the Amateur Athletic Union Championships. Dave faced stiff competition in the 1972 800 meter finals, which included Kenyan runners like Mike Boit and Robert Oko, as well as the favorite to win the race, Evgeny Arzanov of the Soviet Union, who had won the 800 meter championship 3 years in a row. Dave's strategy in both the 800 meter and the mile had always been to step up on the home stretch and really kick into drive at the last moment. In the 800 meter race, all runners must stay in their lanes for the first turn. After that, all the lanes are open to all runners. Since the inside lanes are the most advantageous, most runners try to be ahead at this point of the race so they can control the pace and avoid potential collisions as runners fight for the spot. While it was surely disheartening for Dave to see all of the other runners way out in front of him, Dave did not change his strategy of saving his kick for the final stretch of the race. While all the other runners were pushing themselves to stay within the lead pack, Dave remained calm and ran his race, even as the others took a huge lead. But by the halfway point, the other runners began to show their fatigue, and Dave's experience in running the longer mile races, which require more pacing, began to show. Dave began to catch up with the lead pack, and eventually passed some runners. By the time the race was in its final stretch, Dave still had the energy left to kick into high gear and boost at the ends, while all the other runners were just running on fumes trying to hang on after sprinting so hard to control the race early. Remarkably, Dave was able to pass all of the runners in front of them, including the favorite Yevgeny Arzanov of the Soviet Union, who collapsed right at the finish line as he was passed by Dave. Dave's strategy of holding back while the others wore themselves out to control the early lead allowed him to win the gold medal in the 1972 800 meter race. Next, we have Jing Ru. In some of the earlier examples, we have seen how hanging back in a race can actually lead to a positive outcome, but that isn't the only way you can race. At the 2024 Youth Olympics, a speed skater named Jing Ru employed a strategy that is the exact opposite of Stephen Bradberry's strategy. At the very beginning of her 1500 meter race, she used all of her energy to boost into a powerful lead and came all the way around to the point where she was behind the main group. In reality though, she was the leader with a big gap behind her for second place. The other skaters did not seem too worried though, knowing that it was a long race. While the other racers jostled for position and tried to control the group, Yang just had to concentrate on keeping pace, but she did not need to worry about battling for position until someone else made the move to go all the way around the entire ring to catch up. As the race went on, the other skaters forgot about the fact that the skater in the back was actually nearly a lap ahead. Once Yang stood at her final lap, the bell rang indicating to the skaters that the leader was on the final lap. And you can see the lead pack of skaters start to battle each other out for what they think is the end of the race. They even start sticking out their feet at the finish line as they cross. But only Jing Ru was on the final lap, and the others now need to scramble to continue the race for the last lap, as Yang can now take it easy as she has already won. Next, we have Dick Fosbury. Dick Fosbury was a high jumper in the 1960s. When Dick Fosbury was in high school, athletes that competed in the high jump used techniques that look much different from the high jumpers of today. Throughout high jump history, many jumpers would finish their jumps by landing on their feet prior to this time. For many years, the upright scissor kick method was the top method for athletes in the high jump. But by the time Dick Fosbury was competing in the high jump, the straddle method was considered the most advanced technique. But Dick Fosbury was frustrated by the straddle method, and with high jumping in general. Early in high school, Fosbury was considered the worst jumper on the team, and would typically barely make the cut to compete in competitions. Throughout high school, he experimented with many different techniques, including the scissor technique and the straddle method, but none of these techniques seemed to work for Dick. He eventually began developing his own technique. The resulting technique involved sprinting diagonally towards the bar, then curving his body and jumping back first over the bar. Dick noticed that he was able to increase his personal best jump by a whopping 6 inches in one day while developing his new technique. Dick innovated this technique at the right time, because tracks began replacing the pits of sand, dirt, or straw at the end of the high jump bar with foam, which allowed him to sell out back first without having to worry about landing on his back. Though this was not always the case. In some of Dick's early high school events, some of the schools he competed at didn't have foam landing pads, and he had to land flat on his back on the ground at these locations. In 1964, Fosbury finished second in his home state of Oregon in the high jump, and the world got to see his new high jumping technique. But the Fosbury flop, as it began to be known, was not yet in danger of being stolen. It was considered an awkward jump, and one newspaper of the time called Fosbury the world's laziest high jumper due to his unorthodox technique. However, if you examine the science behind Fosbury's backward flop, you will see that it allowed him to bend his back up and over the bar at the top of his jump, as his center of mass travels under the bar while he flops over it. Throughout his college career, Dick Fosbury continued to develop and tweak his technique, to the point that by 1968 he was able to win the NCAA championship in the high jump. Fosbury went on to the US Olympic trials, where he was able to secure a spot on the US high jumping Olympic team. In the Olympic Games in Mexico City in 1968, Fosbury ended up taking the gold medal and set a new Olympic record, which opened the skeptical eyes of the high jumping community. After that, the Fosbury flop quickly gained acceptance. In the following Olympic Games in 1972, 28 of the 40 competitors used Fosbury's technique. And in the years that followed, it became the standard method that all serious high jumpers used. Next we have Bill Armstrong. Bill Armstrong was a professional hockey player in the 90s. In summer training camps in the early 90s, Bill had the tendency to pick up the puck using his stick and could keep it elevated above the ice, like a lacrosse player holds a ball on his stick. Bill began playing around with this ability in practice, and since flinging the puck over your head in a game would result in a penalty, Bill determined that the only way to ever practically use this skill that wouldn't be against the rules would be to lift it up and fling it in the net from behind, all while keeping the stick below the crossbar. Bill continued to do this move in practice, and to his teammates' disbelief, was able to pull it off in scrimmages. Bill's teammates urged him to pull off the move in a game, and in the 1993-94 AHL season, Bill pulled off the move as a member of the Albany River Rats. Bill pulled off his high wraparound move and scored on 4 different occasions with Albany, and 2 more times while with the Detroit Vipers. And just a few days after he pulled off this move in a game for the Detroit Vipers, college player Mike Legg pulled off the move in the NCAA regional semifinal in front of a huge audience. Because the game that Mike Legg was playing in was such a big game with such a huge audience, the high wraparound was introduced to most fans through this game. The move that Bill called the high wraparound began being called the Michigan by some fans. Since then, the move has been pulled off several times in the NHL. With a move that's so difficult to defend, why isn't it done more often, you may be asking yourself? And the answer is, it is really difficult to pull off. Even with infinite time and no defenders on you, it's not easy to pull this trick off. And even NHLers don't have a high success rate when trying to pull off this move. And finally we have Art Ross. Art Ross was an early hockey pioneer who started his career as a skater before he went on to coach. Ross used his creative mind to develop a lot of innovations for hockey. It was Art Ross that designed the net that was used in the NHL from 1927 to 1984. This net design was specifically designed so that a puck was more likely to stay in the net if a goal was scored. He also improved the design of the puck by adding beveled edges and used synthetic rubber instead of natural rubber to prevent the puck from bouncing so much. Ross helped create the center red line and icing to prevent games where teams just shot the puck all the way down the ice all game. To help the red lines stand out from the blue lines, Art Ross suggested using the stripe design that is used today. But for this video, we're going to concentrate on an action that he made as a coach for the Boston Bruins. On March 26 of 1931, Ross substituted a 6th skater for goaltender Tiny Thompson in the final minute of play in a playoff game against the Montreal Canadiens. The rules state that each team may play with 6 skaters and that one of those skaters was allowed to be a goalie, but didn't say that one of them had to be a goalie. So with his team down, needing another goal, Ross made the call to take out the goalie and put in another skater with a chance to score on the ice. Although the Bruins lost the game 1-0, Ross became the first coach to replace his goaltender with an extra attacker, a tactic that has become a widespread practice in hockey. What did you think of this list? Was there anyone that I missed? If so, let me know about it in the comments below.